Fred Simons was my youth leader in the early days when we were, before the church was built, when we had youth in the Milnerton Primary School hall.
Fred Jenkins and his brother, Thelma, actually taught them to ride motorcar.
And then I became the sort of unofficial driver for the youth, using his car because I didn't have a car in those days.
And someone let us know that the church was actually being formed, and the first service was going to be held at Milnerton at the hall that Sunday.
I only really started here when, about 2 or 3 weeks after that first meeting, they started evening services. And my brother and I were playing outside the tennis club hall, and this very gruff Dutch accented voice saying, "Why are you boys playing there? Come help set up."
And my wife, whose name was Thelma, she was quite a remarkable woman, and she said, "We must start a Sunday school here."
We were the first, yes, the first 9 that started.
And the minister then was a gentleman by the name of Jennings, Athol Jennings. And we got to know him very well, and he was a much, much loved man.
And we started services in the tennis club hall, but it became a bit of an issue because of the fact that there was always drink bottles and things lying around. So we fairly soon moved to the town hall.
My very first appointment in the circuit ministry was at Belleville in the Central Circuit, and that's when I first came to preach at Milnerton. Some time had to be spent before worship, clearing out the old empty bottles and sort of airing the room from the smoke of the night before. And but it was always a lovely experience to drive out there on my little scooter and preach.
We started Sunday school at the Swats house when I was 9 years old, and then afterwards we moved to Milnerton Primary School hall. We were all given a Bible for good attendance and coming every Sunday to Sunday school and remembering our verses and reciting them all.
And Peter Storey, Reverend Peter Storey, came and took his place.
I was appointed to Camps Bay and Milnerton, and that was in 1961. So the next 4 years I spent helping to build up the work that Athol Jennings had begun just a couple of years before at Milnerton.
And during Reverend Peter Storey's time, we moved to the Milnerton Primary School hall.
The big move was into the local school hall, and suddenly the congregation just exploded, and we had growth that was very rapid. In those days, people were, I think, far less secular than they are today, and it was a fair assumption that most people who came into the suburb would want to look for a Sunday school for their kids. And we were there, and I think we were the kind of community that made them feel very welcome.
Now, this was completely different. Peter Storey was something else. He had an agenda of his own, and he was fearless, and he had decided that the government was the biggest enemy in the country.
The very same time that I started at Milnerton, I made my first trip to Robben Island. And I have to say that there was enormous tension within me as I tried to make sense of these two completely different worlds. Here was a comfortable white suburb with young people who could look forward to lives of fulfillment and comfort. And on the other hand, just across the water from them, within sight almost of them, was this hellhole where political prisoners were being subjected to the most terrible indignities. And here I was ministering on one Sunday at Milnerton, and the next Sunday I was trying to bring a word of hope to people like Nelson Mandela and Robert Sobukwe and others who I met on the island. And obviously I became deeply, passionately committed to the liberation of people like Mandela and Sobukwe. I realized that these were giants, that these were people who should be having a part and making a crucial contribution to the problems of our country.
He was a good minister with an agenda.
When he left, then Trevor Bosman came, and then of course he stayed. He was also part of Camps Bay, and then we got him after that permanently with Milnerton.
I came here as a minister at Milnerton in 1965, and I was appointed to serve this congregation for 5 years.
This young guy, he had a drive of his own. He was a builder, and he was responsible for the building of the church at Milnerton.
A piece of ground had been purchased before I came, but there were no buildings on it.
One Sunday morning after church, Rev Trevor Bosman said to us that we have now acquired a plot, or some plots in Milnerton, and we were going to build our own church. He took us to the top of Erica Street, the corner of Erica and Graaf, and we had to park our cars there because we couldn't get to the church site. There were no roads, and people thought he was crazy.
In that first year, 1965, two significant things happened. The first was the laying of the foundation stone of our multi-purpose hall, which today is our church.
Yes, Peter Storey's mom laid the foundation stone when we had the laying of the foundation stone.
Fred Simon's daughter, Kathy, she presented the bouquet to Mrs. Storey. That one of our members, Mr. Fani Kotza, became the mayor of Milnerton, and he invited me to be the mayor's chaplain, and our Methodist Church in Milnerton became the sort of host church for the council.
We didn't have a proper organ. We had a little fold-up pump organ that Miss Westhuizen used to play, and then at one stage Arnette Theunissen also played for the services.
And also helped one year with Trevor Bosman. We had no organist, and I played the pump organ at the back of on the stage at the back of the church.
And I started going to Methodist Church when I was 10 years old, and that was around about 1967.
Being a new work, we needed to raise funds, and there was no cinema anywhere near, and so someone had the idea of starting a cinema show every Saturday evening.
We would pack up between 100 and 150 young people into the church on a Saturday night, hire a film from Metro Goldwyn Mayer and project it. I was the projectionist.
And we used to have snacks. They used to sell snacks at half time, but it was the place to go on a Saturday night. I think the whole of Milnerton went. It was the place for the young people to hang out.
But he was the perfect glue for the church. He made the church grow even more.
After Trevor Bosman, Reverend Charles Crooks was here. Pete Visser lived in the house next to the manse.
I think he had eyes on us from the very beginning.
And asked if he could start an interdenominational youth group. I was appointed as one of the leaders. Beverly was appointed as the treasurer.
And it worked. I moved across from January 1971, and the Methodist Church received me with open arms. I was not allowed to teach until I had done several Sansa courses, and Auntie Marion Hanks was very strict about that.
It was during his time that I was appointed as Sunday School Superintendent. Because of me being appointed Sunday School Superintendent at the age of 26, there was unfortunately a big rift in the church, and a number of folk left because they felt that Uncle Jim Daly should have been superintendent.
It was all the young people of the church at the time. We were all involved with the youth, with Uncle Fred and Auntie Thelma. And so we were all in the youth together, which was also very special too.
At one stage we had Ralph Thornley here as a youth pastor. We also had Joan Dominy as a youth pastor, unpaid in those days.
100 Rand a month, not guaranteed. And the next year he said to me, I'm going to put you at Milnerton. Charles Crooks is looking for a youth pastor. His youth pastor's leaving.
Ralph was quite a character, very boisterous, very different to the sort of people that we'd had involved with youth work up until that stage.
We'd been out somewhere, I can't remember where we went now. And I just remember saying to them, this is the start of 1974. Who wants to commit their lives to Christ for 1974? Well, I almost got killed in the rush. That entire group went to the rail, and there was weeping, and kids were really, really serious about what they were doing, you know. And they went home and there was lots of hugging and that. Now I was all brand new to them, brand new.
He was youth pastor when I was in high school.
They used to come across in the mornings and have prayers before going to school. We used to meet in the little hall about 7:30 in the morning. I had to pull myself out of bed to be there. And we had some prayers together and off they'd go to school.
We continued, Sunday school continued very strongly. And after Charles Crooks, we had, I think, Charles Stevenson.
I left Christmas Day 1974 to go back to Cape Town because Charles Stevenson was coming and he didn't want a youth pastor.
I started attending the Sunday school down here, which Fred ran. He headed up the Sunday school, and he was assisted by Bruce and Gwyneth and Larry and Arnette and Gail and possibly a few others I'm forgetting. And just remember being in Fred's class, and we would meet out in the quad area with the sun on a Sunday morning and just asking life's big questions. And of course he never faltered and never hesitated to just give us of his absolute best. The Sunday school was very, very big at the time, so we packed out the hall. So the camaraderie and the friendships that were built over that time, was amazing.
Once the Sunday school became too big for the Koelas hall, the wing of classrooms and youth room were built, and at that stage the teenagers were split from the Sunday school, and we held a teen church in the youth room.
We would go do 10-pin bowling, we would go do putt-putt. Not really big on movies then, but I think we just had lots and lots of fun in this hall, which would be experiences I'll remember for absolutely ever.
There were so many kids in the minor hall. It was I just remember like really rushing to get a seat.
Jim McKernan played a big role in his time here, and of course we saw the creation of the Cape West Coast circuit during his tenure.
I joined the church when I was about 3 years old. My grandmother, Queenie, used to bring me. Bev's mom was my Sunday school teacher. I used to believe she was an angel because the sun used to shine on her hair, and I just remember that being a very happy stage of my life.
Alan Robinson, who came a few years later, was not re-invited when his term of office expired, and he just upped and left. And we then had to find a stand-in, and Reverend Barbara Muller stood in for that year.
And then I started teaching after I was confirmed, which was possibly the late 80s, early 90s. This lesson, of course, officially Auntie Myrtle and Bev had to come sit in and listen to see how I was doing.
Oh, and the church, we'd done lots of church picnics when I was younger at Fred Simons's farm. Beautiful days there, lovely. Those were great fun.
We'd go to Glencairn and have camps with 80, 90 kids.
We were normally groups of about 10 young people, but we had lots of fun. We always used to have braai on Saturday night, and then we'd have camp concert afterwards.
I remember a camp very clearly where Freddie thought it was funny when children were thrown into the water, and one of our teenagers walked up behind him and turfed him in, and that was a very unhappy moment for Freddie.
It was resurrected then by Derek and Audrey, about 3 or 4 years after Mark left, and they ran it for many, many years, until we then started appointing full-time youth pastors, and Ian Hoyer was the first of those.
grade 6, I joined the worship team as well, which was the new worship team where drums were finally allowed in the service. And I used to come to the evening services with my parents every Sunday until I actually joined the worship team and started singing with them, and was part of the worship team for many years.
Well, I stayed in the Sunday school for 40 odd years. I then also worked in the church office. When Terry Malt came, I worked there for 2 afternoons a week for a couple of years. And the ministers, I think Terry Malt was like the father figure.
Coming from Kimberley, Methodist, we immediately decided we'll go to the Methodist again. And Terry Malt was the minister there, and we decided, yes, we felt at home there, and we were really embraced by everybody. Derry came to me one evening in Tableview and asked me, wouldn't I please consider to do the choir, or the songsters, to do this, the music for the songsters. And I agreed.
I was met at the door by Terry Malt, who was the minister then. He was in his retirement year. And I just remember him saying to me, like, you were the weirdest person I'd ever seen in my life before.
She was great with her hair and then the different colour the glasses. She was youth pastor when my younger daughter was in youth.
But then later on I saw the rest of the kids and I was like, this is scary. These are people that I don't know them from Adam.
The time at Milnerton was a time of great blessing for me and a time of spiritual growth.
During his ministry, that was kind of when our youth was the biggest, and he was a good preacher, and we really enjoyed him.
The Sunday school in all the rooms down the side, the WA with all its activities, memorable ones, some of them, like the Boerewors roll in auctions that they used to have in the church hall, run by Mr. Ben Kirschbaum and Mr. Pohl.
It really, the kids just poured in, On a Sunday night we had quite a lacquer's the best word. We had an evening service going.
We had the very vibrant bands in the evening and lively worship.
Nicole was the youth pastor when I became a senior, so I spent a lot of time with Nicole, which was also great fun.
I had a couple of kids that were complicated, like I've said, Tammy. And the other was like a very traumatic time we had when our minister Gavin Leverton left.
Things went wrong, and the stay did not have a good ending.
We were all just heartbroken.
I cried, and I made others cry, for which I'm really deeply sorry, and for this I apologize.
He was only human, and what he needed at that time was grace.
Gave me a few grey hairs, but actually was very, very precious, and we had some really, really good times together.
Yeah, and then Lynette arrived, and it got easier and better.
I had to get used to the loudness of contemporary music on a Sunday night, but began to discover the joy of praising God in another way.
I came with Lynette in 2006, and as I asked Elaine, what was it about Milnerton that you liked? And she simply said, everything.
One of the areas of ministry that was very interesting was the youth ministry. They would take sandwiches, and I think it was soup in the winter, to go to help people there. And then in the end, that ministry actually changed into the Doorstep ministry that happened on these premises every week, and it was a wonderful outreach ministry. The holiday clubs were very important in our time here.
Yeah, no, I've been coming to Holiday Club since, what is the age of that, 4? Something like that? I forget. since you're allowed in. And then I transitioned to being a leader as soon as I grew out of it. And yeah, it's been a good experience for me.
Oh yes, holiday clubs were great. They were exhausting, but I was involved with holiday clubs already when Jared started them. I then followed Sharon to Brooklyn and did her holiday clubs with her. So getting to run my own when I was here was quite an interesting new experience, but I loved every minute of it.
It was just I found it was just a really good time to kind of get closer with the church community, and just to, for a lot of kids, I found as a leader, kind of for a lot of kids, it was just a place to get some love and some, acceptance, and have some fun over the holidays.
Choir that I was tried to be involved in from time to time, learned very quickly that I wasn't going to get a four-part harmony out of the folk there.
After the marriage course, we'd have a big dinner, and sitting across the table, Hilton turned to us and said to us, "Do you realize you're going to be running the marriage course in future?" And I said, "Us." And he said, "God has shown me you're going to do it."
Bev and I started the marriage course, and that ran very successfully for about 12 or 13 years, until that season seemed to come to an end.
And then when I met my now husband, I knew that this was obviously where I wanted to be blessed, get married. And and then obviously have my children also join the church, which encouraged me to then become part of the Sunday school.
There was a wonderful generosity from this church. It was the first church that I'd come to where there was a particular thought that the church income needed to be tithed. And although I was told that that was a little bit of a struggle at the beginning, I believe that God blessed the work of this church because of that decision. It was the 50th anniversary dinner that took place at Seamount. That was a wonderful highlight.
We'd do 50 golden years, and we all decided, okay, we're going to practice and practice and practice real hard. And we played it that night, and it went very well. We first did the Rivers of Babylon, and after that we did the 50 golden years.
And I came back to be the youth pastor and wanted to give back to the kids what I had received here when I was here, so that they could experience a little bit of the joy that I had from my years in this church.
How did we come to this church?
Technical difficulties. We were both brought up Anglican and wanted to get married, but I'm divorced, so we needed permission, and there were some technical difficulties, and we
had come to the church for Alpha and met the people, liked the people, and it was the obvious choice as to where to go next. So we came here, joined, and have been happy ever since.
Rory was the youth pastor. He was replaced by Charles, and then I helped Charles run youth. He also invited me on the resort weekend. So then he sort of pushed me to become more involved, so I did in the youth. And then I think it was Julian that pulled me into doing the AV. And so I did that too. And then I think it was Cindy that pulled me into doing the Sunday school, so I did that as well.
But the one thing that I found particularly interesting was the quality of the people in the church.
It's the people that make this place. It's got nothing to do with the walls. It's got nothing to do with any of the aesthetics.
And I found Milnerton to be my family. I love Milnerton. I love the people in Milnerton.
You know, the highlights are by far the people.
I made some of the best friends that I've ever made in my life.
I taught in the Sunday school for 45 years and watched generations of children growing up, eventually teaching the children of some of the children I taught earlier.
Also just exploring my faith in learning to question. When I was younger I was always told not to question. It was bad to question, but actually was encouraged here, so I very much enjoyed exploring that part of my faith.
Elizabeth and I were new parents, and of course so many of the people at Milnerton were in a similar position. There were times when things got a little bit out of hand, and there was a moment, I think, when the congregation were rolling in the aisles while we used to wear preaching gowns in those days, the full dress, and I was running around trying to catch John right round the circumference of the hall, and fun, he ran up the steps to the platform. I grabbed him and I had to preach the rest of the sermon with my son in my arms. And but that was Milnerton at the time.
Just had a wonderful time over all these years, and just been blessed too to be part of the Sunday school right from the beginning with Uncle Fred and Auntie Fel.